there's so many other trace elements that we need that are just missing. So taking a multivitamin is good because you're gonna hit some of the gaps. But remember, fruits and vegetables, it's not just the vitamins that we're trying to get out of the fruits and vegetables. There's other chemicals in there that can be really helpful for us. All right, next. So, what are some of the red fruits and vegetables? There's a list. Next. What are some of the things within? What are some of the phytonutrients? Lycopene, anthocyanins, astaxanthin. And these are things that are going to help in reducing our risk of cancer and heart attack, reducing our risk of Alzheimer's disease, and they can have gastroprotective effects. So these are things that we want to incorporate into our diet. Next, the orange-yellow phytonutrients. So there's a list of some of those things, and these are the things that it helps with. Obviously, beta-carotenes, which help with vision and boosting our immunity, also reduce risks of cancer. A lot of these things are reducing the risk of cancer because cancer is caused by inflammation and increased oxidative stress in the body. So all these antioxidants and plants help to reduce inflammation as well as alkalinize the body. These are greens, all right? So look up there and see if you're getting all of those things in your diet, all right? And if you're not, then starting to think about taking some more of those things in. And if you can't, then looking at multivitamins or supplements to try and help out. But all of these things have antioxidants and other things. Indoles are actually chemicals that help with the metabolism of estrogen. And they help, in estrogen, when it metabolizes, it can go 3 different pathways, 2 of which are pro-inflammatory and pro-cancerous, and can lead to things like fibroids and ovarian cysts and other things. So the greens in particular can be very helpful in reducing that. Plus we get folate. All right, the purples and blues, boysenberries, blackberries, lots of berries, the eggplants, and purple cabbage, purple kale, purple potatoes fall in there from a vegetable standpoint. Interesting thing here is the phenolics. These are anti-aging, so keep that in mind. Next. All right, white brown phytonutrients. So the question there was what, onions, garlic, bananas, jicama. I love jicama in salads. Cauliflower, dates actually fall in that group. One of the most important things is allicin, which is a great antimicrobial, and it helps to lower cholesterol and protect the heart. So the starch actually raises insulin, but will increase serotonin. So there's some benefits to this, but again, the amount you have can be. Quercetin is a great anti-inflammatory. All right, next. So that's nutrigenomics. So those are all the things that are going to help to drive and change the way our cells function, change the way our DNA is being read, and help change the way that we feel and we look. One of the newest concepts in medicine to come out in the past decade is something called epigenetics. Anybody heard of epigenetics? So going back to our reference of the DNA being the hard drive, epigenetics is the software. And so when we are being formed in our mother's womb, basically we have these tags that are on our DNA that then determine whether or not that DNA opens up and is being transcribed or it's closed and locked in. All right? If we didn't have the capacity to do that and all of our DNA was read all of the time, we would not be able to differentiate into what we are now. So when we say that people have the cancer gene for this, it doesn't mean necessarily that cancer gene is being turned on all the time. It's epigenetics that determines whether or not the genes get turned on or turned off.
How do you know if you have that? I always wonder when people say, oh, I have that gene. I'm like, how do they know?
You can get tested. We can test your DNA and then we can determine whether or not you have that. So that's that's the power of this information, is now we realize that you can actually turn off cancer genes. And some of the things we'll talk about, that's how they work. They get in the cell and actually turn off. We can open and close our DNA based upon these histones and these methyl groups, and based upon how they are triggered, change it. Stress can influence that. Phytonutrients can influence that. Toxins can influence that. Inflammation can influence that. So the more we modify, the more we can then turn on or turn off genes. In Dr. Campbell's book, the China study, he clearly shows that in rats and humans, when given high doses of aflatoxin, which comes from peanuts, it's a fungus that grows on peanuts, that then when consumed goes right to the liver and turns on the cancer gene. So what they were finding in the Philippines was that the more affluent kids were actually developing liver cancer, but the non-affluent, the more humble kids were not. And what's going on here? What they found is that even though the peanut consumption was relatively the same, the affluent kids were eating more protein, more meat protein. And when they looked at the percentage, 20% or more of meat protein calories ended up turning on that cancer gene and promoting it. When they were down below 5% or less, it either stopped it or actually reversed it. So again, the power of what can happen with epigenetics. Go ahead to the next slide. So this how they discovered this was a scientist at Duke University was looking at the agouti mouse. The agouti mouse is a mouse that's been bred because of its propensity for obesity, diabetes, cancer, dies early. Sounds like most Americans. Anyways, they took a multivitamin that was rich in these ingredients, and they gave it to the pregnant mothers. And what they found is that this is what came out, exact same DNA, but the epigenetic structure was then changed so that what part of that DNA was being read changed the function, and out came a skinny brown mouse that was much healthier, much more resistant to diabetes, and lived a lot longer, just because of the phytonutrients that were given during pregnancy.
Responsibility.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said mom's responsibility.
Yes.
So much pressure.
Exactly, exactly. And Time magazine actually came out with an article on this not too long ago. I think it was in 2009. And where they looked at how the first 9 months shaped that epigenome more than anything. Now you can modify the software in your computer, right? But if there's a bunch of software that's loaded on, it's hard sometimes it takes a lot of effort and energy and money to change the way your computer functions if you don't want it to use all that software. It's the same thing.
I just have a quick question about that. How is this like one of those things that you were talking about, the personalized for each person? Because I've known a lot of people who are complete junk food junkies, like the whole family. Like they just chow down like circus peanuts, those little orange styrofoam.
Right.
I mean, that's like they don't even drink, they just drink Coke and milk. They don't, the whole family. But yet they're thin and they're fairly healthy. Like how does that, I'm always confused about how that works out. Like,
Well, don't mistake the size of a body and health.
well, it's not just that. It seems like they're not even, like there's no one's complaining of being at the hospital recently or on
Well, and
antibiotics or anything.
and that's why there's more to it than just what you consume.
Okay.
There's a really interesting study looking at Fijians who are high smokers, low level of lung cancer.
Huh.
Why is that? Has anybody been to Fiji before?
Mm-hmm.
It is one of the most de-stressed places
yeah.
in the world.
Yeah.
And there's a tremendous community effort there. What's going on there is more than just what they're putting into their body.
Right.
Now, if that family, my guess is they don't feel as good as they could. And you take somebody who's an Olympic athlete and you put them on a diet like that,
Yeah.
they may not balloon up at all.
Yeah.
they may be able to detoxify to the point where they can stay quote unquote thin,
Right.
but biochemically they're a mess. And they may not feel, and they go out and try and compete, they're not gonna compete at the same level.
Right.
So that's where the change. But what we're seeing more and more now is that the babies that are coming into the world are much more behind the 8 ball. When I went to medical school, diabetes type 2 was a rare occurrence among children. Now it's almost to the same level or almost exceeding the number of type 1 juvenile diabetics. I mean, it was unheard of before. And we're seeing it as young as 5 years of age, type 2 diabetes, which is ridiculous. All right, next. Okay, so why I got into nutritional medicine. The top prescription is for your arthritis, but it may cause a heart attack. So the second prescription should prevent a heart attack, but it could damage your liver. So the third should prevent liver trouble, but it may destroy your spleen. So the fourth protects the spleen, but has been known to eat away the prostate. The fifth, you see the problem. All right, next. So let's get into the spices and herbs then. Talk about what some of their potent superpowers are. All right, next. And don't forget edible flowers. All right, so there's actually a lot of antioxidant properties in flowers. The colors are amazing for our bodies. And so they're not just, anytime you go to a restaurant and they garnish with a flower, you can eat it.
Did they wash it?
Let's hope
They
so.
didn't, then it questions whether they washed the rest of their food.
I know.
So,
Yeah, but that's,
But
I don't know, that's
these
what
are all-
broccoli
Broccoli
flowers, what about
In a
broccoli
restaurant, you're not supposed to
sprouts?
put anything on a plate
Sure.
that you can't
yeah, you can do both. They have different,
Watched it on
broccoli sprouts have different nutrient potential for us than broccoli flowers. Different.
And is this the same for like cheese and like how would you consume say like the chamomile and stuff? Obviously that would be could that be in a tea form or
Yeah.
Tea foam.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about roses?
Chamomile you can
We'll
add
talk
in the
about
rice
roses in a
food,
minute.
that's
All right,
what I
next.
do.
My neighbor's in
the
trouble.
chocolate,
He's
like
got a lot of
adding
roses.
that.
All right.
Smells so good.
Okay, next. Okay, and actually, one of the ways that I first got kind of introduced to eating edible flowers was doing a CSA. Do you guys know what a CSA is? Community Supported Agriculture. All right, so you can actually purchase a box of locally grown organic fruits and vegetables that either will be delivered to your house or you pick up from the farmer's market. And a lot of times they'll put in there edible flowers.
no. That's
All right, so these are some of the medical benefits, and we'll go over those individually. So let's go to the next one. So garlic. What does garlic do for us? It has potent antimicrobial effects. It contains an ingredient called allicin. In fact, there's a company in Great Britain that's actually isolated this, and you can actually buy that supplement online, and it is as potent as a lot of the antibiotics and antifungals that are purchased through the drugstore. The problem is that because it's a supplement, it's expensive, and so that's where the problem is.
Can I ask a question on garlic? I have a Korean neighbor who cooks garlic. She grows it and then she cooks it for days. I mean days. And it is, when it is done, it doesn't give off any odor. And it actually tastes good. You can eat it right out of the thing. Has it lost all its nutritive properties that way?
No. And that's the amazing thing about spices and herbs, is that they maintain their properties. You can cook them. Remember at the beginning we talked about
Well, you
cooking
said
for
that.
30
Then
minutes.
I began to wonder,
And
she
so-
cooks it for days.
And so it does change some of the chemical properties. There are certain things, if you take fresh garlic, it has more antibacterial potency to be used right away. But if you cook it, you still have some antimicrobial, but it changes some of the potency. All right, next. Turmeric. All right, I love turmeric. I have turmeric every day. I put it in my shake.
Do you?
Yep, I take at least a quarter of a teaspoon, if not a half a teaspoon, and I put it in my protein shake every single day.
Cooked is more delicious than uncooked.
Yes, but I like it uncooked too. But it is one of the most potent anti-cancer spices out there. And if you look, when you go to PubMed, which is a place where you can look at the research, there is no other spice or phytonutrient that's being studied more right now than turmeric and curcumin. There are well over 2,000 studies going on right now looking at the medicinal benefits of turmeric.
How much should you use for like 8 ounces of like milk or whatever is fat free?
How much turmeric should you use?
Oh, I got a protein shaker if you make.
All right, so well, I put a quarter of a teaspoon to a half a teaspoon, and it will affect the flavor. So the more you put in there, it gets pretty spicy.
Yeah, it is.
But it has a sweet flavor to it. So one of my favorite things is to put some peaches or nectarines and half a banana and mix that in
Well,
there.
my wife always making smoothies so we could dump some in there.
Now, is it almost as effective with the caps, like I get from Organic India? Is that still almost as potent?
Yeah, and what's interesting, so what we're finding too is what it gets consumed with. So in the Indian culture, they tend to use it with dairy and pepper. That allows for greater absorption into the body.
Usually they fry all of the garlic, onion, and turmeric together
Right.
with ginger too.
And,
so that they add it to everything.
and they actually, we're finding that certain spices have synergistic effects when they're combined together than just individually. So there is benefit from doing just the capsules, certainly. But if it's by itself, it may not be as well absorbed.
Yeah, this actually has pepper and ginger.
Yep. But the pepper actually helps with absorption. Now, sometimes you don't want it to be absorbed. You want to stay in the gut because it's going to exert its effects on polyps. They've done studies looking at individuals with colon polyps, and they will take, and I don't remember the dose of the turmeric exactly, but they will take turmeric or curcumin, which is the same, for a period of a year, and they go back and do the colonoscopy, and they have a reduced number of polyps.
Wow.
So with apple cider vinegar, how does it work with that, do you know?
Apple cider vinegar and turmeric?
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
Oh.
It's like mentos.
I use apple cider
No,
vinegar for
no.
other things, but I have never seen it used in combination.
What is the BDNF?
Okay, so brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So one of the most other fascinating things that's come out of research over the past 10 years is how many of you knew you could regenerate the nerve cells in your brain?
I just read about that, like
It's
few
fascinating.
months ago. Yeah.
You know, we used to think once you drink that alcoholic beverage and boy, you kill brain cells and you're done. Well, that may be true, but we can actually regenerate brain cells.
With turmeric.
And turmeric's one of those things that gets in there and actually promotes brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Calorie restriction also promotes brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And they found that all you had to do was reduce your caloric intake by 20% and it would stimulate BDNF. Now, most people in America, that would mean that they go from a 2,500 calorie diet to a 2,000 calorie diet, and that would have a substantial impact on their brain function. And that's one of the things it does in decreasing Alzheimer's disease. All right.
I have one last
Yeah.
question before you change that. A friend of mine, a relative actually, who's a doctor, and she's a medical doctor, said to me the other day, I take cordyceps mushrooms because it helps the cramps in the backs of my legs. She said, you can save money if you use turmeric. Instead of cordyceps mushrooms, it will do the same thing. Do you know anything about that?
Again, it depends upon the cause, but yes, turmeric has such potent anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer effects. There's very much crossover. Cordyceps
Worth a try.
has great impact on the adrenals, and helps with energy, and then exerts its effects with anti-inflammation. So some people may not benefit as much of swapping those out. They may need cordyceps, but it's certainly worth a try. Next. Ginger, another potent anti-inflammatory, comes from the same family as turmeric, so it's not surprising that they have similar effects. Ginger also has an amazing effect on the gut, and it really helps to promote gut function. It increases gastric emptying. It's great for nausea. I use it all the time with pregnant women who are of nausea and vomiting. It's used, there's plenty of studies looking at it with cancer patients who have nausea from chemotherapy. You give them ginger prior to getting the chemotherapy, and it reduces their nausea dramatically. Interestingly enough, there was a study I saw that it was decreasing kidney stones. It actually shrank kidney stones. It was a small study, and more research needs to be seen, but ginger has a very potent. This is another one that sometimes I'll switch out of turmeric, put that in my shake, depending upon what I'm putting in my shake that day.
Does it matter if it's powder or fresh? Or
It
fresh?
does not. You can the powder. That's the amazing thing about spices, is that you can use them dry or you can use them fresh. Now, when you use them fresh, some of the oils and stuff will have some potency that you won't get from the dry, but a lot of the antioxidant and some of the therapeutic effects you can get with either or.
About ginger drink.
Ginger drink
Yeah.
depends upon the ginger drink.
Ginger
If
ale.
it's ginger flavored, it's not going to have much. But I mean, I've had some Jamaican ginger ale that, boy, about takes my socks off. and that actually helps with circulation. I mean, I can feel it in my fingers. And if I drink that on a warm summer day, I'm done. I mean, I get too heat intolerant from that because it really warms me up.
Well,
It's
my
much
wife
better
makes
to
this
drink on-
drink out of, she eats it, buys at the store, so she buys the ginger root, and then she cooks it basically, and puts some lemons or something like that in it, and that's supposed to help with her. She's got, she's gluten-free, so she's got celiac and
Yeah, so
healing the gut.
absolutely, does wonders in the gut. All right, next.
What's an antiemetic?
Antiemetic is nausea, so
Oh.
vomiting.
I took it when I went out on a sailing trip.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great with fish and sushi and stuff. It's really good. All right, cinnamon. Cinnamon is another one of my favorites. Anytime I make fresh oatmeal, meaning that I actually take the oat groats and I flake it, and so I have fresh. If you've never had fresh oatmeal, you've never had real oatmeal. I mean, it's amazing. It's so delicious. But cinnamon combined with that is one of the healthiest things for your blood sugar that you can do. And there's plenty of studies looking at just a quarter of a teaspoon of ground cinnamon a day can help really regulate your blood sugar metabolism. And here's one that a research article that looked at a half a teaspoon mixed with honey. Where's our honey person? Right there. Yeah. So that actually reduced arthritis, symptoms of arthritis. So it's another potent one. It's one of the best antioxidants that there is. It has antifungal effects, and it's a natural sweetener. I mean, you can use it instead of sugar. I find when I put that, I never put sugar. Occasionally I'll put a little honey in my oatmeal, but most of the time I just put fruit, cinnamon, and oatmeal.
Actually, a little bit of stevia and a little ghee, no sugar.
Yeah.
It tastes great.
Where
Yeah,
do you source out for the oats the way that you
Yeah.
Are you talking
Hold
about
that
steel?
question until afterwards,
Okay.
and I'd be happy to
Okay, cool.
answer that question while we're eating.
Also wanted to ask about maple syrup. Does
Yeah,
that
hold
have any redeeming properties?
Absolutely, but we'll talk about that one.
Oh, okay.
I'm looking at the time, and I'm
Okay.
seeing Danny in the background, and he's holding his belly, so. I got a few more slides to get through. All right, so licorice root is one of my favorite things to use, particularly with adrenal fatigue, but it has tremendous powers. And depending upon how it's prepared, it can be very good for the gut. It's also great for the immune system, great when you have colds. It's used in a lot of the mouth preparations to help with gingivitis and tooth decay. So licorice is amazing. Raw licorice is amazing, but very potent. You have to be careful, it will raise your blood pressure. So next, rosemary, another one of my favorites. It's actually a natural preservative. You put rosemary on things. If you cook with rosemary, and then it'll last